This week, we'll discuss the secret star chamber courts in America, the confrontation between the Catholic bishops and President Obama, and the death of Steve Jobs.
Hello, I'm David Smith. This is October the 7th, 2011, and this is the first episode of Week in Review. The purpose of our program is to discuss some important issues that have happened in the past week, news stories that seem significant and important, and we'd like to cover those with you. Of course, we'd like to know your comments, your opinions, so feel free to send those to us, and we'll incorporate them into our discussion. The first story I'd like to cover today is the announcement that there is apparently a committee, a secret committee, that advises the President of the United States on the possible assassination of American citizens. This case became important with the announcement of the assassination of Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen this past week. And then it was announced that there was indeed this committee. We don't know who's on the committee. We don't know where they meet. And this is very much akin to the Star Chamber that used to exist in England, and from which our founding fathers left England so that they could avoid this. It's a secret court. No one knows where it meets or who the members are, but it has the power of life and death. And no one knows what the charges are against the individuals who are brought before this particular body. And now we understand that even American citizens are subject to the decisions of this secret court. There may even be different courts composed of different individuals for different security issues. So that presents even a larger problem, because we don't know how many courts there are or who the individuals are on the court. This is a threat to our Constitution and to the liberties that that Constitution is supposed to protect. It's a very serious issue, and we need to take some very serious examination of it in order to secure and maintain our liberties, which are already at threat by the various provisions of the Patriot Act that we're all aware of.
Now, David, I do have one question.
Yes.
And everyone, I'm Daniel. I'm producing the show, and I'm helping David out with getting the show off the ground. David, I do have one question. Has there been any examples where Obama has exercised this list and has actually taken action?
Yes. Anwar al-Awlaki, who was killed this past week, was put on this list. We don't know. There's another issue right there. We don't know who else is on the list. But anyone apparently can be put on the list. For example, God forbid, someone may decide that I'm a threat because of what I post or on this program, and I could wind up on that list. No one knows what the criteria is for being put on the list, and no one knows how many people are on the list, or who they are, what they're, why they're on the list, what they're considered to be an enemy combatant to the United States. This violates the provisions of the 5th, 6th, and 14th amendments to the United States Constitution, which provide that we will be charged upon indictment by a grand jury for these crimes that could put us at risk of our life. Anwar al-Awlaki was a citizen of the United States. Granted, he was living in Yemen. He held some unpopular opinions and may even have advocated the overthrow of the American government. However, still being a United States citizen, he is entitled to the protections and provisions of the Constitution. And for him to have been assassinated, as he was, is a very serious concern, because it means that anyone might be subject to these secret courts.
Well, no, one question I do have on that is, has there been any example where, or for this gentleman, was he killed here in the U.S. on U.S. territory, or was he abroad in the war zone?
No, he was in Yemen at the time.
Okay.
However, he was targeted. The problem is you don't lose your rights as U.S. simply because you go abroad. The government cannot say, well, now he's outside our borders, we can go and kill him. The problem would have been that even, what if he had been in the United States and was on the list? Would they have assassinated him? There's a whole other issue. We don't know how this secret court system is working out. You know, the method by which it works. We're just finding out, the government is just admitting that this actually exists. It was, and I believe we have a Reuters news article on our website that deals with the government's admission of the existence of this secret court system. And the other odd thing is it's a committee of individuals whom no one knows who they are, who make this recommendation to the president, who then acts on it. So we don't understand the methodology that they use, what criteria they have for making this recommendation to the president. And it is a very serious issue that we need to keep before us and realize that it is a threat to our constitutionally guaranteed liberties and rights. So we need to be concerned about that. And so I would encourage all of you, look at that article that we have posted to our website, and any other articles that you might want to Google. If you have not been made aware of this issue, it is an important issue, and I would make every effort to research it, to examine it, because it is a issue that does touch all of us. My second issue for discussion this evening is what I'm calling the possible religious mobilization against the Obama administration. On our site is a copy of a letter sent from Archbishop Timothy Dolan of New York, who is the president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. This letter was sent from him to President Obama and was published by the Archbishop, which is unusual. Generally, these communications between the President of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops to the President are confidential or are certainly not generally published. Apparently, Archbishop Dolan has resorted to publication of this letter because, as he indicates in the text of the letter, not only he, but Francis Cardinal George, the Archbishop of Chicago, who was the previous president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, had written the president, and neither of them had received any response from the president or the administration. It appears that they were simply being ignored. They were writing to the President with concerns about what the conference is calling family and life issues. Of great concern to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops is the issue of DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, which the Justice Department has chosen not to defend when it is being challenged in federal court. Now, it's the obligation of the executive branch to defend the laws of the United States when they are challenged. That's the special duty of the Solicitor General of the United States. However, the administration has decided not to defend this particular piece of legislation, and it has caused the Congress of the United States to have to hire private counsel to defend the act in federal court. Some of you may have heard of the recent questioning of the expenses of the law firm that has been retained by the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, to defend DOMA. The Archbishop in his letter indicates that this is of such serious concern to the Conference of Catholic Bishops that it might lead to a split between church and state that would have serious ramifications for the nation. Now, we have a separation of church and state, but there is some cooperation between church and state, especially in areas of social welfare. The church does much of that social welfare work and does so through contracts with the federal government. The possibility exists that that will no longer be possible because the church will not be able to fulfill the federal expectations if it is required to abandon its positions on marriage and also issues regarding the conscience clause for those who do not wish to participate in abortion or in the distribution of contraceptives who are employed in the medical field. I think this is significant because, after all, you have about 65 million Catholics in the United States. That's a significant number of people. Certainly, I would think that it would be of concern to the administration as we're coming up to an election cycle, that you would not want to simply ignore or offend so many potential voters. So that's an issue that's of some concern. Attached to the Archbishop's letter is a survey of matters that they consider to be of special concern and that they wish to enter into a dialogue with the administration. However, so far the administration apparently doesn't seem inclined to engage in that conversation. One of the important cases that is cited both by the Archbishop in his letter and in the survey is Galinsky versus the United States Office of Personnel Management. And this could be a significant case in the federal courts because the basis of the case is that the Defense of Marriage Act is unconstitutional because it is a form of sexual orientation discrimination. So this becomes an issue which will probably push this, however the federal court decides, into the arena of the Supreme Court, who will finally have to make a decision on this. But that's going to be a very interesting case. And just recently, I think as of today, I had heard just before I left the house to come over here to our studio to do the broadcasts that the Archbishop for the Military Services, Archbishop Broglio, had responded to a statement from the administration that military chaplains would be allowed to perform same-sex marriages anywhere. And Archbishop Broglio informed or made a public response that no Catholic chaplain, none of the 256, I think, would be allowed to do so, simply because DOMA is still the law and it's still in effect, and they would not be allowed to do so. And there was also the issue of the use of Navy chapels for same-sex marriage ceremonies. And the Association of Naval Chaplains has also indicated that they will not allow that to happen, or they will not participate in any such ceremonies because of DOMA. So there's a very serious confrontation brewing over these issues of conscience and religious freedom, and it will make for a very interesting election cycle that is coming up as these issues become part of the presidential debate. I'm just checking off on my notes here. And the third issue I'd like to bring up, of course, is the death of Steve Jobs, the co-founder of Apple Computers, and its recent CEO and chairman of the board. We have a video clip that we'd like to play right now, reviewing the life of this remarkable individual, and then Daniel and I are going to engage in a little bit of a conversation about his effect upon the culture, on the technology, the development of technology, and on the quite remarkable influence of this individual who did so much and has affected all of us, whether we realize it or not. So if Daniel can play that, we'll continue the conversation after the video.
Okay, let me get this switched over to our video. And
of a man who literally changed the way we live our lives every day. Steve Jobs, the visionary founder and leader of Apple Computer, has died at the age of 56. A giant in business, technology, and entertainment, Steve Jobs had been battling pancreatic cancer for 8 years. His place in history was assured when he helped invent the personal computer, but that was only the beginning. Here is ABC's Bill Weir.
Before he put a virtual world at our fingertips.
And we call it the iPad.
Before he turned household tools into objects of desire.
Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
Before he changed the way we are entertained.
And you can watch it on your iPod.
A 20-year-old Steve Jobs launched a revolution from his parents' garage. With buddy Steve Wozniak, they set out to move the power of the computer from the laboratory to your lap.
The penalty for failure for going and trying to start a company in this valley is non-existent.
And his brimming confidence was validated when they launched the Macintosh.
We worked hard, and in 10 years, Apple had grown from just the two of us in a garage into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees.
But the 80s brought a power struggle with Apple's board, and Jobs was soon fired from the company he founded.
And so at 30, I was out, and very publicly out. What had been the focus of my entire adult life was gone, and it was devastating.
But he did not wallow, and in his 30s, he met his wife, started another computer company called Next, and took over Pixar, changing animation forever.
My name is Woody, and this is Andy's room.
In '96, Apple bought Next, and soon Jobs was back in charge, leading a digital renaissance. After his return, Apple stock soared more than 7,000%, turning that garage startup into one of the most valuable companies in history. And in a valley of geniuses, his myth grew into Thomas Edison meets Willy Wonka proportions, building anticipation for invention shrouded in secrecy.
Are you using that currently as your phone?
I haven't been able to because I can't take it out in public.
While keeping his life fiercely under wraps. Not even his board knew of his pancreatic cancer.
I just wanted to mention this.
And he didn't reveal he'd had a liver transplant until after the procedure.
I now have the liver of a mid-20s person who died in a car crash.
Through life, while his body grew frail, that mind, that drive, never quit. A standing ovation welcomed his surprise appearance at the spring launch of the iPad 2. But then came this letter in August. I've always said that if there ever came a day when I could no longer meet my duties, I would be the first to let you know, he wrote. Unfortunately, that day has come. Here was a man who had peered into the future, seeing how we'd work and play 20 years before we'd ever hold the proof.
Everything will be portable. People want large color screens that they can put photographs on. People want motion video.
And when the body began to fail, he was driven anew by the clock and that burning need to build something great.
Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important.
A titan of American business, Steve Jobs was just 56 years old. He leaves behind a wife and 4 children. And just minutes ago, Apple's board of directors issued a statement saying, in part, Steve's brilliance, passion, and energy were the source of countless innovations that enrich and improve all of our lives. The world is immeasurably better because of Steve. We're going to have much more on the life and impact of this remarkable American, Steve Jobs, on a special edition of Nightline. And you can get the latest anytime at abcnews.com. I'm Terry Moran in New York.
We'd like to thank ABC News for that special report on the life and death of Steve Jobs. Daniel, I was thinking this afternoon about the difference between when I was a teenager and we were just getting videotape, where people could have a video camera and they could record onto a videotape player, which was VHS, the family Thanksgiving, the opening of presents on Christmas morning, the Easter egg hunt in the backyard, and parents could send the tape by mail to a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, a friend, and then they would play it on their VCR on their TV. This was also when giant screen TV was first premiering. I remember that we had one of the first ones in our living room made by Earl Muntz. It was a very large box. In the corner of the living room, you had to pull out the drawer, and there was a highly polished mirror that would reflect up onto a highly unique screen from a TV that was in a projection box inside this larger box. The picture had been inverted, and it was a reflection system. Shortly after that, I believe Sony came out with the first rear projection giant screen TV. But they were still very large, and if you wanted that type of entertainment. And now you can do all of that from a device that you hold in the palm of your hand. You can shoot the video or the photography and send it instantly around the world to as many people as you want. So I was just thinking how far we've come in about 40 years. It's really quite amazing. And much of it is due to the vision of Steve Jobs, who not only wanted to run a great company, but he wanted to change the world, the way the world works, and apparently he has done that.
Indeed, I remember those early days only because as a child, growing up in the early 80s when we got our first Atari system. And since then, yes, technology has definitely progressed quite a bit, and I do agree there were few visionaries that really made significant leaps forward for us. Steve Jobs was definitely one of those, especially when I can now get pretty much everything I want right here on the phone. I can even watch our broadcast from anywhere in the world, sitting in the back seat of a cab in New York, and here we are broadcasting from Arkansas. I can even be across the globe over in Delhi and still get the same information, same stream, same searchability. Basically, the iPhone and these mobile devices are our link into the internet, which is starting to amass the sum of human knowledge.
Well, this is, maybe I'm being overbroad in my time, but what about Steve Jobs? Do you think he's a creator of the modern culture? I mean, you know, when we think back to when I think back to when I was a teenager, I couldn't have imagined this at all. This was not even on the radar. We had no idea what was going to come.
Well, we were talking the other day regarding the visionary status and how being in charge of the company actually gives him a lot of liberties that an employee trying to take a visionary approach wouldn't be afforded. For example, an employee has to justify a project that he believes will lead people in the direction that they want the company to go. He has to justify that to his boss. Steve Jobs had a lot less of that. He had to justify it to the board, but he was in charge of the company, so he was able to drive the company wherever he wanted it to go, and just as long as he was getting results, the board was happy. An employee can't really do that, and that's why I kind of fear what's going to happen to Apple after, or of course now that he's gone, and with his new appointee.
I've heard, I've read and heard many things over the last couple of days. Tim Cook is apparently an excellent CEO, but does he have that that vision that Steve Jobs was able to transmit to all of Apple Computer, its employees, its managers, its executives, even the board of directors? Is there someone like that? Or is it going to have to be split between the CEO and perhaps someone who's charged with the creative and development side of Apple's operation?
Well, it's entirely possible he does have that vision. I know in the pipeline, I'm not sure how far in the future, but I would probably project there's probably a year's worth of developments that Jobs was working on, and we'll see that come out over the next year. I suspect after that will definitely be his replacement's vision of new products. And I'm sure there'll be extensions of current products, but I'm kind of wondering, in the early 90s, whenever Jobs was fired, the company didn't really take the right turns. And when he came back, he completely turned it around, and now to become one of the #1 tech companies. So we'll see here in about a year or so what happens to Apple.
Well, that's an interesting point also, which I think gets mentioned but not considered as fully as it probably ought to, is Steve Jobs as a CEO. He managed to take a company that was bankrupt, and in the first quarter that he returned, it had a $250 million profit. And from that point on, of course, it's the #1 technology company in the world. So just as a CEO, he stands as one of the tallest trees in the forest. But you know, it's also just as an individual, everything that he impacted, all branches of technology, as they pointed out, entertainment, culture, the way the culture is now run. You can name a lot of important people who have been very influential in human events. But certainly Steve Jobs must, as I said, stand as one of the tallest trees in that forest of individuals. Indeed. So, well, he'll be missed. We'll see what happens in the future. A couple of additional notes that I'd like to highlight. Today is the 10th anniversary of the commencement of the Afghan War. We've been in Afghanistan for 10 years now. It's also the 440th anniversary of the Battle of Lepanto. For those of you who don't know about that, there was a naval battle in the Bay of Hatras in western Greece, where a Christian naval, or the European Navy, defeated the navy of the Ottoman Turks and prevented the invasion of the Ottoman Turks and Muslim forces into Europe. So I don't know if the launching of the war 10 years ago had anything to do with that date, if they chose that particular day, but that was an historical note that I found rather interesting. Also, Fred Shuttlesworth, the co-founder of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, died Wednesday at the age of 89. With Martin Luther King Jr. and Ralph Abernathy, he founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference as a response to the outlawing of the NAACP in Alabama, which viewed the NAACP as some sort of communist organization. And since it couldn't be founded and organized in certain states in the South, these three men, Martin Luther King Jr., Ralph Abernathy, and Fred Shuttlesworth, formed the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and provided a great service to the movement for civil rights in this country. Unlike Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy, who were intellectual leaders of the civil rights movement, Fred Shuttlesworth was a scrappy preacher from Alabama. I heard Jesse Jackson describe the other two gentlemen as architects, engineers, and they described Fred Shuttlesworth as the carpenter, the man with the hammer and the nails who did the building, with the guidance of the architects. So I'd also encourage you all, if you have not yet, please see the movie The Help. I saw it last weekend. It is an outstanding movie. It's one that will give you a great deal of insight into life in the South and a particular cultural manifestation of the South in the midst of the civil rights struggles. So that's all I have for this week. Please feel free to comment on our show, post any questions or emails or comments that you have, and we'll certainly try to address them next week in episode 2 of Week in Review. Thank you again, and have a good week.